to second grade, Unit 8, Reasoning with Equal Groups. The purpose of this video is to provide an overview of the standards, intended pacing, and sample instructional strategies for Unit 8. In this portion of the video, we are going to review the AKS and Indicators of Achievement, or IOAs, for Unit 8. The AKS is the overarching knowledge and skills that students are expected to master. The IOAs are the learning objectives that allow students to demonstrate mastery of the AKS. The AKS and IOAs may not be taught in their entirety the first time they appear on the instructional calendar. As you have seen, some AKS and IOAs will appear multiple times throughout the year. In Chapter 2 of this video, we will look to see how the AKS and the IOAs in Unit 8 are paced in detail. The final unit has two AKS, AKS 3 and 2. Under the AKS, you will find the Indicators of Achievement, or IOAs, that we are teaching at this time. In Unit 8, this is the first time this year that we will work on AKS 3. In this video, I will discuss some nuances and changes for this year. AKS 2 IOA 2A has been an ongoing standard and is seen again here in Unit 8. You will also see that we have provided you with the state coding at the end of the IOAs so that if you are looking up resources on the Georgia Department of Education website, you are able to find the IOA that is related to the GCPS IOA. IOAs without the state coding at the end are specific to Gwinnett. In Unit 8, students will be working on the foundational components of multiplication through AKS 3. Through 3.A, students will determine if a group of objects within 20 is even or odd. Although it may be tempting to merely look at the final digit to make this distinction, through this IOA, students will group objects such as counters by pairing them or counting them by twos. Having these concrete experiences will help students to gain conceptual understanding of odd and even numbers and not just memorize a rule. Students may also reason about doubles to determine if a quantity is even or odd. If you remember back in Unit 6, with IOA 7C, students learned how to partition shapes into equal-sized parts. Through IOA 3C, students will use their understanding of partitioning to partition a rectangle into rows and columns of same-size squares and count to find the total number of squares. Notice that this IOA is clustered with IOA 3B and appears before 3B on the pacing. IOA 3C intends for students to count squares with an array in order to give students the background that they need to associate addition and multiplication equations with the arrays of rows and columns while addressing IOA 3B. With the understanding of partitioning into equal parts of rows and columns, IOA 3B students will be introduced to repeated addition to find the total number of objects arranged in rectangular arrays, up to 5 rows and up to 5 columns. They will also write an equation to express the total as a sum of equal addends. This IOA involves students using numerical reasoning to find the solution to multiplication problems through repeated addition with solving real-life problems. It is important for students to build models and work with representations involving arrays of no more than 5 rows and 5 columns. One consideration of this IOA is that students should be able to identify the number of groups of a number of objects expressed as a multiplication equation. For example, 3 plus 3 plus 3 equals 9. But it also is the same as 3 groups of 3, which can be expressed by stating 3 times 3 equals 9. IOA 2A has been an ongoing standard for second graders this year, and it will be applied when determining odd and even numbers through IOA 3A. Throughout the year, students have been using strategies such as making a 10 and doubles to add and subtract within 20. Here, they will use doubles and pairing to build conceptual understanding of odd and even numbers. Welcome to Chapter 2, Unit 8. Our pacing guide is closely aligned with the state pacing. With the first year of new standards, we want to ensure we are following the expectations from the state. The pacing guide is an example intended to model how instruction of the AKS IOAs in each unit may be facilitated, but teachers should design pacing to be responsive to the learning needs of their students. In the box, which names the unit Reasoning with Equal Groups, you will see the suggested pacing. For Unit 8, we suggest 4 weeks. The big ideas in this unit are focused on numerical reasoning. The pacing guide is set up with a list of AKS and IOAs, which have been strategically clustered together. This is followed by our suggested pacing. Specifically, the left column provides the learning progressions for the AKS and IOAs. This includes the concrete representational abstract progression and the progression between specific learning targets within the IOAs. Suggested manipulatives are also included in this column. The right column provides resources to guide instruction such as GCPS, traditional lessons, task-based lessons, and resources from the Georgia Department of Education. In Unit 8, we will begin with 5 days of AKS 3 IOA 3A, clustered with AKS 2 IOA 2A. 2A will serve as an opportunity for students to apply what they have learned about adding and subtracting fluently through 20 as they reason about which numbers are odd or even. We begin this learning concretely with a Georgia Department of Education learning plan. In this task-based lesson, students will use manipulatives and cutout cards to explore the conceptual understanding of odd and even numbers. On the second day, they will continue to use manipulatives as they continue to apply their work with doubles and addition facts to the concept of odd and even numbers. On day 3, teachers will have an opportunity to formatively assess students using the Georgia DOE's Bumpy Not Bumpy diagnostic. Based on students' understanding, teachers will create a concrete representational lesson using the bullets on the pacing guide to address specific needs of the students in their classrooms. On the 4th and 5th days of this unit, 3A, students will continue to progress their understanding of odd and even numbers from concrete representational to abstract, where they will use numerical reasoning to explain why numbers are odd or even. Next, students will have 2 concrete days of partitioning into rows and columns in order to count a total number of objects. This will lay a foundation for IOA 3B because students will gain conceptual understanding needed in order to accurately describe array models using addition and multiplication equations. Students will culminate the year with 8 days of 3B, progressing from concrete, representational, to abstract. As students build understanding of counting columns and rows, they will build their schema for multiplication by associating repeated addition equations and multiplication equations to related models. Welcome to Chapter 3, Unit 8, Instructional Strategies. In this video, we will explore math instructional strategies for Unit 8 for your second graders.
In Unit 8, students will begin to build a foundation for their understanding of multiplication through real-world problems through IOA 3A. Students will determine whether a group of objects is odd or even. The groups of objects will be limited to 20. This is a manageable number for teachers to model and for students to work with as well. Keeping the number small allows students to focus on the strategies without barriers related to the magnitude of numbers. It may be tempting to teach students to just look at the digits in the ones place to order or to classify into odd or even. However, this is not a recommended strategy for second graders because it does not build conceptual understanding of the concept. One way to prepare students for this concept is to use number sense routines. Let's look at a second grade number talk from Number Talks by Sherry Parrish. In this book, there are 3 categories of number talks focused on doubles and near doubles for second grade. So we have category 1, category 2, and category 3. The first category involves doubles with sums up to 20. If we look at the first example, which is a string of numbers which go together strategically, we notice that the first example starts with 3 plus 3. 3 plus 3 equals 6. That is considered a doubles fact. Notice right below it, we have 3 plus 4, which is considered a doubles plus 1 fact, or a doubles minus 1 fact, or a near doubles fact. Regardless of how you choose to name it, the add-ins 3 plus 4 contain a doubles fact. If you are just beginning to use number talk routines with your students, category 1 is a great place to start. The intention is for students to verbally explain the sum without the use of paper, pencil, or manipulatives, making it a prime opportunity for teachers to model students' thinking by recording what they say on a chart paper or on whiteboard. This routine can be a short introduction to your math block or an activating strategy. Category 2 of your doubles number talks is going to have doubles between 10 and 20, while category 3 contains larger numbers. For the purposes of our work with odd and even numbers in second grade, category 1 is an appropriate level to use in order to reinforce this particular concept. The recommended strategy for teaching odd and even numbers in second grade is pairing. It is one of the recommended strategies. Let's look at what it could look like in your classroom. On the pacing guide, you will find a resource from the Georgia DOE entitled Bumpy Not Bumpy. In this inquiry-style learning plan, the engage part of the lesson sets students up for thinking about fair share. They're going to be looking at same but different images. Notice how the stars are arranged on the page. Students are allowed to think flexibly about the image, but notice its intentional arrangement. The meat of this lesson actually begins in the next part, which is the explore part of the lesson. It begins with a story about fair shares for twins. So once there were two twin brothers or sisters who always shared whatever they had equally. If they found some colorful shells on the beach, they would count them out and share them so that each had the same number of shells. When mom gave them cookies for a snack, they would be sure that each got the same number of cookies. Sometimes they were not able to share things fairly because there would be something left over. This happened once when Dad gave them 5 marbles. Whenever they shared things and there was a leftover, the twins put the extra item in a special box of leftovers that they decided to keep for their baby brother. At this point of the lesson, you can ask students to turn and talk. Ask them to talk about why the twins were unable to share 5 marbles equally. Depending on your class's proficiency, you may require, or they may require, some cubes or some counters in order to figure this part out. So like an acted it out strategy, okay? Well, after discussing how the twins shared objects, ask the students to investigate what numbers of objects they could share fairly and what numbers would have a leftover when the twins shared them. Assign 3 or 4 numbers to pairs of children. Their task is to decide which of the numbers could be shared fairly and which would have a leftover. Provide linking cubes to help them in their investigation. I would begin with no more than 10 to 20 objects per partnership. While students are working, be sure to listen in to hear their thinking. Create a class anchor chart to display the numbers that can be shared or cannot be shared equally. Notice that I didn't even name the numbers as even or not even or odd, not even yet. In the next part of the lesson, you will give groups of 2 to 3 students a set of 2-column charts, 2-column cards that have been prepared ahead of time. The cards are representing numbers 1 through 12 if you look at the number of boxes or numbers of squares, excuse me. And what I did is I just cut them out. And you would just give each student like a little baggie, or each group of students, I should say, a baggie of these little cards. You can put them on cardstock, or you can cut them out of construction paper, however you decide to copy them. But you will copy them onto some paper and give them to your students. So the first thing you will do is ask students to describe these cards. Okay, you're not going to tell them their numbers 1 through 12. That could definitely be one way that the students might describe them. But they may also point out that some of the rectangles are bumpy or have an extra piece on there, and some of them do not. So that's something that they may say. So again, you're not feeding them this information. You are listening in and questioning as you may need to move your students along. So after they have given you a description of what they think, how they think the pieces could be described, then you're going to ask them to sort them. Sort them in a way that makes sense to them. They just need to be able to explain their reasoning. Students are likely to make a group of bumpy numbers, such as this one and this one. This would not be bumpy. This would not be bumpy. This would not be bumpy. This one is bumpy. So they might not, but I'm sure some students will, some students won't. But again, this is an investigation, a very inquiry-based type lesson. So you want the students to explore and just be able to come up with ways to describe the two-column cards. So again, it is not pertinent to rush the terms of odd and even on them right now. However, you are going to next ask the students, as they're exploring and as they're discussing, you're going to ask them how you could determine if the numbers would be bumpy or not. Have a discussion with the students. Be sure that students are noticing that a bumpy number of objects would not allow the twins to share equally, while the non-bumpy numbers of objects would. If you feel that students have a good grasp of this concept, label your anchor chart with the titles even numbers or odd numbers appropriately. To continue this discussion, ask students what would happen if they put two bumpy cards together to create a new two-column piece, like this. So if we put together two bumpy ones, look what happens. We wind up with a one that's not bumpy. Okay, so if they're at the point where they're using the terms odd and even, then we're going to use those terms, odd and even, okay, or odd and odd, which is what we did right here, an odd and an odd. Okay, so as we continue with this unit, you are going to facilitate the conversations in their discoveries as they combine the different types of cards. And as I said, in this unit, we will continue to explore odd plus odd, which is bumpy plus the bumpy. We'll explore even plus even, which is bumpy, not bumpy plus not bumpy. And then we'll also explore odd plus even, which is a not bumpy and a bumpy. If your students don't use the term bumpy, please feel free to use the term that your students are using to describe these cards prior to you introducing the terms of odd and even. This foundational lesson will set the stage for students' understanding of odd and even numbers in preparation to use repeated addition and writing equations for those situations as they're leading to their understanding of multiplication.
So, which strategy? In mathematics, the emphasis is on the reasoning and thinking about the quantities within mathematical contexts. Specific mathematics strategies for teaching and learning are not mandated by the Georgia Department of Education or assessed on state or federally mandated tests. Students may solve problems in different ways and have the flexibility to choose a mathematical strategy that allows them to make sense of and strategically solve problems using efficient methods that are most comfortable for and make sense to them. It is critical that teachers and parents remain partners to help each child grow to become a mathematically literate citizen. These standards preserve and affirm local control and flexibility. From the Georgia DOE's Comprehensive Grade Level Overview. To ensure completion credit in PD&E, please be sure to complete the following Google form. Please scan the QR code in order to get the Google form. Thanks for watching.